This slideshow examines a particular purpose for argument as inquiry. Typically, we may think of argument as a means of persuasion. If you consider how arguments are presented in commercials and in sound bites from politicians, persuasion seems to be the purpose. We can find examples of gridlock attempts at persuasion in the media, and it seems like they have increased lately. These are persuasive arguments that get bogged down in one way of thinking, and they don't seem to accomplish much other than making people angry. Argument for inquiry is when we use the mental exercises of argument to explore a topic. Here's an example from daily life. My teenage son comes to us about every 3 months with the argument that we should replace our minivan, not a cool car, with a different vehicle, a cooler car. He wants to persuade us. We use it as an opportunity to simply ask ourselves, is it time to replace the vehicle? It costs us nothing to consider his arguments. The van is increasing in miles. We only have 2 kids at home, so we don't have to haul as much stuff or people as we used to. The van is not terribly fuel efficient, etc. We may or may not be persuaded, but we don't have to get into a gridlock debate with him. Instead, we can use the process of listing pros and cons to make a considered judgment. When we argue for inquiry, the goal is to learn as much as we can, not to win over someone to a particular idea. Because increased knowledge is the goal, listening and careful thought is essential. Now, if we were face-to-face in a classroom, we would practice this listening activity together. You might find it useful to practice this with someone outside of our class. If you do this, does it feel like a different kind of conversation when you intentionally pause and think over what the other said before responding? This pre-writing suggestion gives good tips for finding a topic for any argument. It really helps to focus on a topic for which you have not made a judgment yet. The believing doubting game is another activity I have previously done in classrooms with students. Imagine how much more civil public conversations would be right now if people adopted this kind of consideration when talking with others with different points of view. Rhetorical context is really important for accomplishing the purpose of the argument. Consider my example of the teenager trying to persuade me to trade the minivan for a different car. How would this argument feel different if my brother-in-law, who sells used cars, were trying to make the argument? Maybe it would feel like he just wanted a sale. How would this argument feel different if my friend, who just bought an electric car, was making this argument? How do you think I might listen differently to my son, my brother-in-law, and my friend? How does rhetorical context affect the way you accept or understand information? The rhetorical context is the setting in which people are speaking, and it involves their personalities and their motivations. When we come across an argument in print, we have more time to consider what the writer is saying. We can choose if we will quickly skim the argument or if we will read it carefully and interact with it. We can choose to look up more information mid-argument if we want. We can't interrupt, but we can write notes and questions in the margins as we read. We need to think about what we are taking from the argument as we read. Do we get the idea the author is trying to make? Do we evaluate the kind of information the author is using and the quality of sources of the information? Perhaps most importantly, we need to think about our mindset as we approach an argument. If you get most of your news from Facebook or other sources pushed your way by a social media outlet or a search engine, you may find that the news already matches the way you see the world. Algorithms in computer software show you more of what you have looked at in the past. If you are really interested in celebrities, you'll get more news feeds about celebrities. If you like conservative political stories, you'll tend to see more of those pushed your way. If you just decided to skim headlines, though, say BBC.com, you might come across a variety of stories, some of which you like, some of which you don't. Here, you could make a choice about whether to believe or doubt what you are reading. How do you think your initial mindset would influence what you do with the author's argument? This image illustrates how thoughts move in a dialectical exchange of ideas. In the same sense that a traffic monitor would observe rush hour and note the types and movements of vehicles, dialectic refers unemotionally to the exchange of ideas. If my son argues that our minivan is getting old and has a lot of miles, I can reply, because it is old, the taxes and insurance are low, and it's almost paid off. If he argues that the minivan doesn't get great gas mileage, I could reply that it gets better gas mileage for highway driving, and road trips are the big reason why we keep the vehicle. We don't have to get angry about the ideas. We can simply send them and return them like a tennis ball in a tennis match. The more ideas we exchange, the more fully we will have inquired into the topic. This should generate maximum amount of knowledge and possibilities, so when it is time to make a judgment, it will be as informed as possible.